Hey guys, for this video, I want to talk about edge loops and how to control and utilize them. Because learning how to isolate edge loops and just being able to control my edges and vertices has greatly helped me in my asset creation. So I thought I'd share with you guys the things that I learned along the way. So this is all from personal experience and there's really no one way or right way to do it, I think. And so if you have other ways that works best for you or like you have ideas that you want to share, please comment them down below. And I would just like to share with you guys the ways that I found very useful when I'm creating assets. Controlling your edge loops and stuff is mostly just for making your assets as optimized as possible, especially if you want to create 3D assets for games and stuff where polygon count or poly count is super important, that each and every face, edge, and vertices should have a purpose, whether it's to contribute to the overall shape and the silhouette or just to simply connect one figure to another. And it is also super useful that you know how to control and manipulate the edges and the vertices and stuff because it helps with a better visualization of the object that you are creating. Like, for example, usually when I model, I like to be free of the polygon constraints. So when I'm adding the small details, I just add vertices and polygons without a care in optimization so I could have my desired shape. And then after that, I would have another step that would focus on the optimization of the asset. This is where I try to remove as much vertices as possible. I try to make it as clean as possible. And honestly, that's a very satisfying step. Like seeing your model go from this to that is honestly a very fulfilling step. So I could have I could remove vertices as much as I can while still holding the shape that I created. So with this process, it has helped me create assets which would have details with as much as I want with as much optimization as I can do. So enough yapping. I'll just show you later. I realized that I've been yapping on and on about how to control your edge loops, how to learn how to isolate your edge loops and manipulate and all the flowery words that I use, but I haven't really started to describe what an edge loop is. So this is taken from dummies.com. An edge loop is essentially a series of edges that connect to form a path where the first and the last edges connect to each other. So essentially it's just an edge that loops. So for this video, I would like to introduce the following concepts that I usually use in my asset creation that has something to do with edge loops. So we have dissolving the edge loops, ripping the edges, collapsing the edges, merging vertices, and really just deleting the faces and putting it back. Okay, so from this point on, I will be off script, so excuse this little demo if it gets a little fumbly. So let's start. Let's start with dissolving edges. I'm gonna use this little model for this demo because it's very simple enough to replicate, but I think it's complex enough to have our fundamentals with the edge stuff. So first, there's dissolving edges. Dissolving edges is essentially, it's super basic because you just select an edge. You just select an edge and then press X and dissolve edges, and they're just gone, and it's instantly more optimized. But the problem here is that you might be left with n-gons, and n-gons are faces that exceed 4 corners. So it's not a quad. If it's not a quad, it's not a tri, it's an n-gon. More than quad is an n-gon. And usually this is a big no-no, and we try to avoid it as much as we can, especially in creating assets for 3D games, right? So what we can do here, there's two things that we can do here. It's either we isolate our edge loop by merging it preemptively. So I'm going to merge this up there by pressing M, merge it last, and this one also. And then when I select this and dissolve the edge is gone and we have a very nice clean topology here. And another way to do it is simply just delete the faces. Delete the faces and then dissolve edge and then just put it back on. It essentially has the same results, and it's really just your preference. But the problem with this is that if this is already like UV unwrapped, and then deleting the faces and adding them back on might have a couple of problems in the UV mappings So, alright, so that's dissolving edges. Let's go ahead with ripping edges. Let's say, for example, I want this to be opened like a can. So all I have to do is press this, press the edges that I want to rip, and then press V. Just like that, the edges are completely separated off. So that's another fun way. For example, you need to add some like another topology here, like another loop, half loop or something. You can easily just do that. Just rip it and add the faces. So for example, I want this to have something like that, like a roof. There we go. That's easily a roof over our, let's say it's a little trash can, because I'm not sure what this is. Okay, so what about collapsing edges? Collapsing edges is essentially similar with dissolving, but this is the movement of how it collapses is kind of funky. So imagine I have these selected and I'm gonna merge them at center, right? And that's what it does. Collapsing edges like this produces that exact effect. So if I do this, collapse the edges, and just like that, my topology is entirely gone. How cool is that? So the difference between this dissolving the edges, the difference between dissolving the edges versus just collapsing them is that you would be left with an edge wherein the two what do you call these? The two vertices collapses. So another fun little thing that you might be able to apply in your asset generation. And I forgot to mention earlier, but the isolating the edge loops also works if you need to add topology. For example, I have the budget for the topology and stuff, and I don't really need this. It looks funky. And for example, this is a very like a high fidelity asset, and then this kind of topology actually kind of ruins it. So I want to add an edge loop here, right? That's Control R. But then it just goes all the way down right there. And I wanted it to end here. What you can do is the same with how you isolated your edge loops before you dissolve them, is you can isolate the mesh that you want to add edge loop in. So quite literally it's the same thing, but like the opposite. And just like that, it's back. Yay! So there we have it. We have dissolving the edges. We can do that. That's a possible thing. And ripping the edges. You can also do that by pressing V. And then collapsing edges. So this is also a very interesting interaction. So you select the edge loop like this. Like if you want to select the edge loop in like parallel, you can hold Control Alt Shift and it automatically selects that for you. And then what happens when you this is what happens when you dissolve it. You know what, let's do it individually. This is what happens when you dissolve an edge. So it's just gone. But when you collapse an edge, it gets the vertices and have it merged at the center. So it would be exactly the same if I select this and this, press M to merge, and then at center. Again, when you're merging, there's like a lot of different options. So like there's merge at center, merge at cursor, collapse, which is exactly what we did earlier, and at first and at last. So, and then if you're out, really, just go back to basics. If you're out of options, how do I add this? How do I add that? Just go back to the basics. Remove the faces and do what your things to isolate that certain mesh so that it doesn't go over. You're basically telling it stops here. That stops here. Because if you select without removing the faces there, if you select this, it's gonna include that. Just let's say this one, because this one doesn't loop properly, so it's not that much of a problem. But for this one, what if we're using this one and we're dissolving the edges here, and then we lose the circle, right? So what we can do is delete the faces that connect your mesh into the mesh that you don't want to be moved. So you're basically saving this part. And then I've deleted it already. I dissolved this, and then I just put back the faces. So there's a lot of ways to do things, and these are just the ways that I find super easy to do, that I find myself doing often. Okay, fun little bonus, because I wish I learned this earlier, and when I learned about it, my mind was blown. But how do you do this kind of shape? Like, it's a cylinder, and then it's like there's a hole punched through it, but you get to keep the shape of the cylinder like this way, but you also have the shape of the circle this way, right? If you had asked me earlier, I don't know how I could have done it without Boolean tool, which is a great tool, but it kind of messes up with the topology, which I don't like, because it gives me more work. But this is a very quick way how to do this. So first of all, I think this is turned off by default, but you can go to Edit, Preferences, and go to Add-ons and add this little add-on. Just search loop, and you're gonna find Mesh Loop Tools. So now, when you go to your for example, we have this plane. Subdivide it to really show the effects of what we're gonna do. And I'm gonna deselect the middle vertex, and then if I right click, you're gonna see Loop Tools, and there's this called Circle, and it makes your object circle just like that. Usually I would Control S and scale it. Control Shift S. Oh, that's same. Control Alt S. There we go. It's Control Alt S. So what this does essentially is, I think it makes your thing round, like spherical. So if I have this thing, if I have this cube, and I Alt Shift S, it makes it circular, right? Another cool little function that I wish I'd learned earlier. But let's try to use the what's this called, the loop tools that we just added. So like, for example, we have a cylinder, right? A cylinder. Let's auto smooth it, right? And then let's delete this because that's hella n-gons. And then let's mark sharp edge, extrude the edges and collapse it. Again, extrude the edges, shrink. You don't have to shrink, but I like seeing what I'm doing. So collapse. There we go. Now how do we add the tiny little circle inside? What we have to do is provide it the polygons that it needed. So maybe like that much. And then you just select your circle. Well, this is a box, but it's gonna eventually turn into a circle. And then loop tools and circle. And you have this little pop-up in which you can flatten it. So it becomes flat or follow their shape. And it has this little cool function where you can turn it and stuff. And it's really just a very cool add-on to have. So I wish I had this. I've known about this earlier, but yes, just like that, we have this little thing. I'm not sure what you're gonna use it for, but it's a nice thing to know. So I think that's it for this video, and I hope you got something from it, and happy modeling! Yay!